Without further ado, I'm going to present to you AMY Klump from Mahoning County. She runs the drug court program over there. Believe me, Amy, thank you.
I don't need this, right? You do need it. I do need this also? I gotcha, okay. Can we bring up my PowerPoint? There it is. Can you guys see that okay? Okay. There it is. Can you see that good? Okay. This is a new one for me. All right. Typically I come around and I talk about drugs in general to high school students. My job, I am a licensed social worker and I have my master's in counseling. And my job typically is to talk to kids about drugs. I work at a drug court. Do you guys know what that is? Drug courts are diversion programs for lower level nonviolent offenders to do rather than send them to prison, because prison typically is counterintuitive to getting them better. And so I've been doing that now for 11 years and I absolutely love it. And we have seen such dramatic changes. I was just talking with Dr. Haas. When the drug court started in '98, we had 50% of the people were 35 and older. They were typically from the city, and they were crack users. Today, about 48% of our court is 18 to 28 years old. Most of them are from the suburbs, and 97% of our court is opiate addicts. So we're talking either about opiates or heroin, okay? What Angelo asked me to talk about tonight is your new legislation that's passed the Senate, right? Okay, it's Senate Bill 3, providing for the medical use of cannabis in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Now, just a little bit ago, Ohio went through something sort of similar. Basically, they were trying to make Ohio kind of they've already decriminalized marijuana, but now they were also trying to make it legal for anybody. Okay, 21 and over to use. Can you go ahead? So, part of this, my boss is the queen of marijuana. She's the queen of marijuana presentations. So I don't say these words. They don't slip off my tongue as easily as they do with her. But let's go back to the basics. Marijuana contains THC. And we're testing for people, we're testing their THC levels. This is the stuff that makes a person high. Okay? Marijuana contains cannabinoids, cannabidiol. I can't say all these words. Okay, there are at least 85 different cannabinoids that have been isolated from cannabis, and they exhibit different effects on people. THC is one of them. Okay? Marijuana THC, this is huge. Okay, I'm 55, and I remember the kids in high school that smoked weed. I didn't do it. I drank a lot, but I didn't smoke weed because it was illegal. But the THC content in 1970 was 3 to 5%. Okay, our weed was pretty kind of laid back and smooth, right? THC content today can be anywhere from 10 to 50%, depending on the quality of the marijuana. So we're talking about a whole different drug than anyone that's of my generation. This is a whole different game that we're playing now. And there's lots of different ways to take and to imbibe and ingest and all the different ways that they are now using marijuana. Okay? You know how crack is the most base form of cocaine? They can now do that with marijuana, and it's a wax, and it's called dabbing. And they'll take a little tiny dab of this wax, and they'll use it, and it's like super powerful marijuana. And that's a big thing now. Kids have learned to do it. It looks like almost like a honey paste. Okay? Those dabs are up to 80 to 90% THC. So what they're doing today is very different than smoking weed back in the 60s and 70s. It's a totally different game. Go ahead, please. Marijuana is still illegal federally, okay, as well as in 27 states. Ohio is one of them, Pennsylvania is one of them. And there are some of the different states that it is still illegal in. Go ahead. Now, you'll see that darker green, Ohio's darker green, you guys are lighter green. That means we've decriminalized it. Okay, a lot of people say you shouldn't send people who smoke weed to jail. Well, it's decriminalized in Ohio. So if someone gets picked up with a certain amount of weed, it's like a parking ticket. They do not go to jail. They do not go to prison unless they have, like, a lot. And that means they're trafficking. Okay? Your state has not decriminalized marijuana at this point. So you're talking about going from no use to the permitting of the medical marijuana. Okay? Now you've got some states. The purple states are the ones where it's completely legal. And Ohio was actually going for that last year. But it failed, thankfully. There's a lot to this, and that's what we're going to try to talk about, is what you're looking at when you're looking at these laws. Okay? Go ahead. So what the Senate bill is talking about, the smoking of dried plant material is not allowed. I'm going to say joint because that's what I'm used to saying. And I feel like I'm silly when I say blunt. Because a blunt is what they call them now, but we call them joints. And I feel like I'm an old lady trying to sound cool when I say blunt, okay? Now, they had also included vaporization. You guys familiar with vapes? Everyone tell me if you're familiar with vapes. Those are like the e-cigarette things. They're steam. Not steam. Are they steam? Vape. It's a vape. Okay? They were originally saying that that was also going to be something that you couldn't do, but they took that out of the language. Okay? However, any of the following made from plants is permissible: oils, ointments, tinctures, liquids, gels, pills, and similar substances. So those will all be okay. Go ahead, please. So let's talk about a couple of those words. Vaporization will be permitted for the use of items similar to e-cigarettes or the vapes, to be used for inhalation of marijuana oils. It's only for cancer, seizure, or post-traumatic stress disorder. What is medical use? What are we talking about? The acquisition, possession, or use of medical cannabis by a registered patient or patient representative. That becomes important when we start talking about schools. Who's a patient? An individual who has established practitioner-patient relationship and has been diagnosed with a qualified medical condition. What's a practitioner-patient relationship? The relationship established between a patient and healthcare practitioner following an assessment of the medical history and current condition and the conduct of a personal examination. So the way that is written means that as soon as someone comes into a doctor, may not have an established relationship with him but are coming for the first time, on that first visit they could be prescribed. Okay? So when you say some of the things, the way that they're said, it sounds real reasonable. Relationship, you assume that's someone that's been with that doctor for a period of time and they know them and they're familiar with the problems that they're having, but that doesn't have to be the case. Go ahead. Go ahead. Here are the qualified medical conditions. There's a whole bunch. I think a lot of people, my dad and my mom both died of cancer. And I would have let them shoot heroin if it made them feel better, okay? Because they were dying, and addiction wasn't going to be an issue for them. And my concern was their comfort. So we talk about a lot of the different things. So cancer is one of the things that it's going to be permitted for people to use. Epilepsy and seizures. It's one of the things that the people who are for medical marijuana really talk about. These, all these kids who have seizure conditions who aren't being treated because there's nothing available, and the only thing that's going to work is weed or marijuana. Okay? ALS or Lou Gehrig syndrome. Then they get into a lot of different things. Now, a couple things I want to point out. Traumatic brain injury and post-concussion syndrome. Those are actually things that it has been determined to be counterintuitive to use marijuana in treating. But they are on the list. Glaucoma. You always hear a lot about people using marijuana if they have glaucoma. The National Glaucoma Society has actually come out and said we don't support the use of marijuana for our patients. Chronic or intractable pain. Argument might be, well, I'd rather someone be smoking a joint than be taking an OxyContin. And then the last thing it says is a condition authorized by the department. What is the department? The department is the State Board of Medical Cannabis. Hasn't been put in place yet. It will be comprised of 12 individuals who will make all the decisions about how this law and who can use it, how this is going to be, if this list is going to get longer, all sorts of things. 12 individuals are going to be making the choices for you as voters. Go ahead. They talk about compassionate use for the sick and dying. Proponents of medical marijuana claim that medical marijuana is only for those people who are sick or dying. However, and this is a lot of this information we're getting from places who have medical marijuana or who have legalized marijuana. A lot of information coming out of Colorado, really kind of working against what they're trying to do with these laws. The average user of medical marijuana is a 32-year-old white male. Very few of those who seek a recommendation for the marijuana have cancer, HIV or AIDS, glaucoma, or MS. The vast majority, 94%, report severe pain as the reason they need a medical prescription. What did we talk about with pain? Come here. We were just talking about this because we're talking about opiates and the use of them. But go ahead and tell me what you said about pain.
So we way overprescribe for it, like 350% more. We've increased our prescribing of opioids by 350% in 10 years, and yet the studies, and I have it, show that people say their pain is no better controlled. Opioids should be for people that are chronically ill with cancers, not somebody who's sprained their ankle or sprained their back.
One of the things that happened in 1995 is that pain became our fifth vital sign. Okay? So, they checked the other four are blood pressure, respiratory rate, pulse. Breathing. Now pain. Seems to me that someone comes in and they have pain and they give them something to numb the pain. Now all of a sudden you don't know what the problem is. That's just my call on that. But this has been a big thing. Pain reduction has become a huge thing in this country. It's why we're looking at such an opiate problem, and it's the same reason that a lot of people are going or saying that they need medical marijuana. In 1979, after 11 states decriminalized marijuana, and that's what Ohio did, back in the 70s, the United States saw the highest rates of marijuana use in history by teenagers, more than 51% by high school seniors that year. Among youth aged 12 to 17, marijuana use rates are higher in states with medical marijuana laws, 8.6%, compared to those without such laws. Why would that be?
Your access.
Access, what else? We as adults are teaching our kids that it's okay to use stuff to deal with problems. If a young person has a problem with anxiety, what is our generation telling them to do? Take a pill. We've got Xanax and Klonopin and Ativan and Valium. If someone has ADD, attention deficit disorder, usually boys, because they're way more active than girls, and so they get it diagnosed with it way more than young ladies, what do we give them? Ritalin, Adderall, Vyvanse. There's all sorts of different medications available to kids. If someone is an athlete, my daughter being one who got hurt every season, knee, ankle, or head, what were they telling me to do for her? Give her an opiate. Okay? Our generation has taught this generation that the way to handle problems is through medication of some sort. And so they want things fixed quick. They're narcissists. They want to take care of things quickly. They want their needs met immediately. And for the most part, we're encouraging them to do that through different things. Okay, go ahead. There are some FDA-approved medications, and this is a thing that never seems to really come out in these elections. There is a medication called Marinol, and it is FDA-approved. It is available in the United States, and the active ingredient is a synthetic delta-9 THC. It is used for appetite stimulation and to reduce nausea. Okay, so that's out there. Then there's a new medication called Sativex. It's currently in phase 3 of its FDA trials. It's indicated for treatment of spasticity due to multiple sclerosis. It is also being tested for cancer pain and neuropathic pain of various origins. Okay? So it would be a great thing because it's not an opiate. But they're in the process of verifying it's okay for its use. The last one is called, can you say it? I'm looking at my doctor. Epidiolex. It's a medication developed by GW Pharmaceuticals that has been granted an orphan drug designation by the FDA. Families of kids with something called Dravet syndrome, which is a major seizure disorder. And these are the parents who really want some help. They have their kids who are having seizure after seizure after seizure. They can apply through their physician to get this medication. So this is something that's available to them right now. The medication is a controlled dose investigational drug that contains, I wish I could say these words like my boss can, cannabidiol and cannabinoids of the cannabis plant. One of the things we talk about too is when we have headaches, do we chew on a piece of bark? No. That's where aspirin comes from. Everything comes from plants. Our pills come from plants. But we get them in pill form. And it's one of the things, even for my heroin addicts, I would rather they go out and use an opiate because at least they know what they're getting versus heroin that they don't. And you have a lot of times with marijuana, same thing. We talked about the effectiveness of it being either 10 to 50% in its strength. That's a huge difference. But we don't know typically what that's going to look like. Go ahead. Here's where it comes about voter responsibility. In Ohio, this is what you need. You need to get to know the law, because when Ohioans really started to understand what they were talking about, it turned out that what they were talking about is essentially developing a monopoly of growers who are going to be able to basically take care of the entire population. There were going to be 10 designated sites for growth, cultivation, and extraction. Okay? And they were going to have these production facilities. And they could package it, they could process it, and everything was through them. And then there would be 6 testing facilities near 6 universities, Mahoney County being one with Youngstown State. So in other words, the devil is in the details. What they did, what the legislators did, kind of to counteract this law that they were trying to put in effect, was to put out an anti-monopoly law. So if we voted for the anti-monopoly law, then even if the marijuana law had passed, they couldn't do it because it was a monopoly. So they're trying to get it from all different ends. So the question is who, what, where, when, why, and how. And that's where this all really kind of, where the rubber meets the road. Go ahead. You're talking about growers licensing. You're talking about processor licensing, retailer licensing, where the location of those retailers would be. The amount of marijuana. This is a big thing, okay? The rule would be, the law would be, no amount more than 2.5 ounces a patient for 14 days. How much is that? Does anyone know? Doesn't sound like a lot. 2.5 ounces. 2.5, okay, let's see. The average joint is approximately 1 gram of marijuana, okay? There are 28 grams in an ounce. So doing the math, this is approximately 70 joints. So 2.5 ounces per patient for 14 days is 70 joints, which gives one 4 to 6 joints a day. That's a goodly amount of weed. Okay? Especially if it's a high-powered stuff. So again, if you don't know what that you don't know what that means, it doesn't sound like anything because we don't know what it means. That 2.5 ounces a patient for 14 days is 70 joints. That's 5 to 6 joints a day. Okay? You need to know that. What about advertising? It said that retailers are prohibited from advertising on radio and television. Is that the only place to advertise? How about the side of a bus? How about billboards? How about store signs? How about print ads? That's what happened when we couldn't put cigarette ads on TV anymore. They're all over the place. Billboards everywhere. Okay, go ahead. And this is where, in the state of Ohio, I think, when you really looked at these laws, and this is not just about recreational use, this is about medical use. So you've got people who are prescribed marijuana, okay? How does this impact the employers? An employer may not discriminate against an individual in the hiring or termination of benefits or otherwise penalize for being a cannabis access card holder. Only if the employer can prove the employee is abusing or misusing their medical cannabis on the premises during ordinary hours of business. To do so would cause an employer to lose a licensing benefit under federal law. That's the ADA, American Disabilities Act. Because essentially this is a person who has a diagnosed medical problem who is being prescribed marijuana for this. So, if you've got someone who's at work and high, or apparently high, but they didn't do it while at work, you're really kind of sticking your neck out a little bit to try to do something about them. A positive drug test may not be considered by an employer unless the individual unlawfully used, possessed, or was impaired while on the premises during the hours of employment. Impaired is a really important word. There is currently no accepted scientific test or level of THC. I work with a drug court. If someone's been smoking weed for 13 years every single day, it's going to take a minute for that stuff to get out of his system. So we usually give them about 30 days to give us a clean urine. Okay? So it's like if someone comes in with high levels, it's hard to say that those levels are high because they just smoked yesterday or because they've smoked so long they just have high levels. So there's no number that indicates impairment, okay? Every employer would be opening themselves up and their company to a lawsuit in the event that they would terminate an employee. So let's think about that. Guys up on high wires. Guys driving big equipment through a warehouse. You know, all these different things that people, you know, labor work is hard, physical work. Yet you, as a boss, suddenly don't have a lot of control over their behavior or their condition, unless you know a heck of a lot more than most people about THC. How does this affect law enforcement? A lot of people say, well, heck, if we get legal marijuana, then it's going to be a lot easier for police officers. They're not going to have to worry about, you know, arresting all these people for weed. Sir, how often do you go out and concentrate on a marijuana smoker? When you're doing your police work? Is that your main focus, is getting all those marijuana smokers? When you typically come upon marijuana, why is that? I don't want to stick you and make you feel, it's typically because you're investigating something else. And you come in and they happen to have a whole bunch of weed there. Police don't have the time or want to spend the time. We've got a heroin epidemic, for God's sake. That's the situation that we're dealing with. So that's how it affects employers. Can you switch? For law enforcement, a registered patient may not operate or be in a physical control of any of the following with a blood content of more than 10 nanograms of THC. So the law has put something in there in regards to a limit, and that's 10 nanograms of THC. Can't drive a motor vehicle, aircraft, motorboat, heavy machinery. Here's the problem. How do you determine if they have 10 nanograms of THC in their system? Can't do it by a urine test. Can't do it by something you're doing at the car. You got to bring them in, and you got to have them get a blood test. So for every time a police officer picks someone up and suspects them of utilizing too much weed, remember, if they have a prescription, you're not supposed to have too much. This would require them to transport each person to a medical facility for a blood test anytime they would be pulled over and suspected of possible impairment. Impairment, in the case of the law, has been determined to be 10 nanograms. A registered patient may not undertake any task under the influence of medical cannabis. When doing so would constitute negligence or professional malpractice. Look at our previous slide. Negligence or professional malpractice based on use is very difficult to prove and places risk on the company who tries to pursue action against those people. So this is where this gets really sticky. Do you understand what I'm saying? Does this make sense? Okay? We're trying to do something that seems to be a positive thing. So now we see has a very complex effect on the business owner and has, we're talking about, we don't want the police officers worrying about these guys smoking pot. There's bigger problems. And now they're going to have to spend a whole hell of a lot of time going to make sure this guy is at 10 nanograms. And that's going to take going to a hospital, getting them checked. It's a lot of time. Go ahead. How does it affect schools? We talked about the patient versus the patient representative. Now, prescribed medical marijuana is for any age, okay? A registered patient may utilize medical cannabis in a public place, including the following: public transportation, on school grounds, in a correctional facility, in accordance with their regulations regarding medication for the school and the correctional facilities, at a public park, or a public beach. So how should the school handle this? They now have a kid who is on medical marijuana. Who holds this? You know, who's in charge of this? Is the nurse in charge of this? If the nurse is in charge of this, there's another part of the law that talks about patient representation. So does the nurse then have to become the patient representative to every kid who has got a prescription for medical marijuana? Okay? And as a school, you have to let them do it and use it, as they do all their medications. Okay? Will other families understand? What are the rules regarding medication at the school? What about public use? Okay, so this affects a lot of things that you don't think about. You just think it's really good for people to have access to medical marijuana. And perhaps there are ways that there can be, but we still haven't gotten through all of this kind of crap to figure out what's the best way for people to use it or not. Okay, go ahead. This is interesting because I think it's a very real part of this whole medical marijuana, legalization of marijuana. You say, how are they getting all the funds? A report found in documents that were turned over in the tobacco lawsuits of the 90s showed that consultants to Brown and Williamson said of marijuana, tobacco companies have the land to grow it, the machines to roll it and package it, and the distribution to market it. Estimates indicate that the market in legalized marijuana might be as high as $10 billion annually. So who's going to benefit, again, from legalization of this? Go ahead. Some talking points to take with you. Medical marijuana use would be for any age. We should not smoke our medicine. There's ways out there that are legal and becoming legal to utilize medical THC, or the stuff that makes us feel better. We should not have to vote on our medicine. That should be a decision made through the medical profession and other folks, not Joe Voter, who only knows this much about the subject. Marijuana is currently the most identified drug in failed drug tests by employers. Marijuana is still illegal under federal law. One of the things I talk to when I go to the high schools, and all the kids want to debate weed. There's nothing wrong with weed, it's natural. Do I know people who smoked weed in high school and are fine today? Yes. Do I know a heroin addict who didn't start out with weed? No. Not one. Not one. And that, to me, people say it's not a gateway. It doesn't have to be a gateway. Alcohol doesn't have to be a gateway. Cigarette smoking doesn't have to be a gateway. But people don't start using heroin by sticking a needle in their arm. So that, to me, is a huge, important piece. I know, and when I talk to kids, I say this, I know from the people in my court, if I have a kid who smoked, 26 years old, and he's been smoking for 13 years on a daily basis, what's he doing? Nothing. We know that it impacts their ambition and their willingness to move It impacts that in the brain. It impacts that part of the brain. We know that. Is it physically addictive? I can't prove that, but I can tell you this. I had a little girl that came into the court. She was 22 years old. She had 3 kids and an abusive boyfriend. She smoked 7 joints a day to get through the day. We put her in a facility. We talk about detox. We detox our people on heroin, on benzos, and on even with alcohol. But we don't detox people with marijuana. They don't need that. Couldn't tell me that after a week of being in a facility where she was not smoking. She came in and she was a basket case. Suddenly, she has to deal with her life. And the marijuana was her way of not coping with her life. Just like heroin is, just like cocaine is. It's why people use. So, anecdotally, I can tell you the negatives about it. And I can tell kids the negative about it. But this is the part, when we start talking about legalizing it for specific purposes, that there's some real issues that we have to look at. It's so important for voters to educate themselves about this. This isn't just like this easy thing, okay, it's legal and there's no other things to worry about. There's lots of things this impacts. So that's just what I wanted to talk with you about tonight, okay? Is there any questions that I could try to answer? As I said, my boss is the smarter one on this.
I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
Could you, aside from marijuana, I'm dying because you're near the end, for you to tell them some of the Ohio high school things that are going on with alcohol and some of these things you haven't covered teaching in schools?
What I do?
Some of the stories you've told us about the latest thing the kids do.
Oh, I have that up too if you want to see. I got slides. I've got slides for adults. I talk about drugs in general. Some of the stuff that the kids are doing today, when it comes to weed, the big thing, the dabbing and that type of thing, it's a whole new game. Alcohol, they now can vaporize alcohol. And women love it because it's no calories, but you get trashed. And they have vape bars. One of the newest things, and I learned this at a high school, and then I had to go back and Google an image of it. It's called butt chugging. Anyone here of butt chugging? Charming. Butt chugging is young man rolls onto his back, friend puts a tube up his arse, and pours a beer in it. It's a new way of getting drunk fast. It goes right to the blood, basically goes to their bloodstream. Doesn't have to go through their mouth. No one can smell it on them. It's a similar kind of perspective of the girls. We've heard of the tampinis. They soak their tampons in alcohol, insert, and get drunk as heck. There's rummy bears. Have you heard of the rummy bears? Take a pack of Haribo gummy bears, soak them in vodka all night, put them back in your bag, take them to school, eat them all day, get loaded. They're very smart. We weren't this smart when I was young.
Thank God.
We also didn't have Facebook and social media. We talk about the huffing, inhalants. I have a whole thing that I do with the kids, talk about different things. When we talk about Adderall and we talk about Ritalin and boys with ADD, when I go to Boardman High School, which is my own alma mater, I can't go without saying what drugs are in this school. One of the first things I hear is Adderall. Adderall is used by high-performing students because they think it gives them focus. So these aren't going to be the kids that are the bad ones. These are your kids who think this is going to be helping them with their performance. Athletes thinks it gives them more power. So I was told that Boardman probably couldn't field a team because so many young guys are taking Adderall. College, a lot of Adderall. So Xanax is, and the thing is when you hear these names of these drugs, we hear them on TV all the time. The Kardashians use Vicodin. Oh, just take a Vicodin. Oh, take a Xanax. They do it all the time. You listen on your reality shows how much they talk about prescription medications. Okay? Anything else?
What about the real estate showings of houses?
Like with the meth?
Houses that are on open houses.
Oh, okay. That is something. There's a couple of things with the open houses. I know I got a rug put into my house, and the kid asked me for some aspirin. So I went to where I have my medicine, and I got him some aspirin. And then I had to go somewhere, and I came back, my cough medicine was gone. Real estate. If you're showing a house, people will come through just to take your medicine. So there's different things that we don't think about. When you talk about cough medicine, I asked the kids today, I said, what do we have here in Newcastle? Lean. You know what lean is? Lean is mixing cough medicine with Sprite, and because it tastes icky, throw in a Jolly Rancher for some flavor. And Jolly Rancher, in its infinite wisdom, has come up with a liquid form, so it's easier to make the lean, and you don't have to wait for it to melt. So, cough medicine. We used to have some in our family we used to send around because it was awesome. And then I realized it was Vicodin, which means it had Vicodin in it. And I was like, this is a felony. And it is. It's a felony for me to use someone else's prescription of scheduled medications. Anything else?
Sounds like fun.
It's a lot of fun. We get more stories every day. I could write a book. My court, I love them. It's very sad. I have been in this court 11 years. We've had 3 deaths while they've been in court. It's very real to me. We have a lot of people who have graduated or been terminated from our court who end up dead. I can be humorous about this, but it's a horrifying reality. Yes, ma'am. Uh-huh. There are medications out there in pill form that is available for people with major seizure disorders.
When my son was living, he had seizures. There's no way in this world would I ever have allowed them to have given my son marijuana for seizures. I don't care how they sugarcoated it. I would never, ever have approved.
And and that's the thing about the FDA stuff, okay? It's gone through all the testing and all the medical testing and things to see if it's useful and to see if it's safe. And I think that I went to a thing, an FBI agent, right? And that's a personal opinion. And like I had an FBI agent because Dr. House and I went back a little bit back and forth. I have some for a while I was very resistant about doctors. It's a bias, not fair. And he said, some of these medications save people's lives. There's just some people that overprescribe them, and there's some people that take them that shouldn't be. And there's different, you know, I mean, there's marijuana, and when we're talking about the legalization, like I said, they are talking about a lot of forms of it. But it's not like in the regular form that people smoke in a joint. And we're done. Okay? Thank you.